So I want to talk about, it's a very important slide, and anybody that really wants to do the technical reading of this is the book that guy Rob Slee is a friend of mine. He's a really brilliant M&A guy. This is his book. It's a textbook, really. It's being taught in some universities now. The point of this slide is whenever you have any kind of a business transfer, okay, motives drive the decision about what to do. That's the first thing you got to get your head around. Motives of the people that hold the stock drive which channel you're going to go down, okay? So let's just call these the range of transfer channels, the range of places you can go to do a transfer if you're a private company owner. So depending on your motives, you might decide to sell to employees, or you might decide to do, which you could do that in the form of an ESOP. We have at least one ESOP company here. Is there any others? Bradford White's here. They've been an ESOP since 1992. And we have got others, many other clients actually, probably 20 ESOP companies we work with. So you might have a motive that says to do an ESOP transaction or to sell to your employees. Or you might have a motive that says, you know, I'm doing okay financially and I want to do this in a gifting fashion to my kids and my family. So you might have a charitable motive, okay? Or you might be in a position where the motive is, I really want the most amount of money I can get. There's nothing wrong with having that motive. If you're that owner, often in private companies, the motive could be different. There could be different elements of why you would want to do a transfer. So at this end of the spectrum, which doesn't happen often, a company can be in a position where it can raise capital, go public. I've never been involved in a company that's gone public. In fact, we don't even do them. When they get to that, if we have one that gets to that point, we hand it off to one of the big four firms because the underwriters want those firms involved in it, and we don't want that risk anyway. We work with private companies. But if you're looking, so that's an extreme case, but you could do an outside sale and continue to work or retire. You could do it through some kind of a co-ownership if it's not a family deal, through a buy-sell agreement. So you get the picture. But here's the important thing to think about. Valuations are going to vary depending on what your motives are. We're going to talk about valuations a little bit, but you know, if you remember anything from today, there is not one value for a transaction. There's multiple values depending on who the parties are that are involved in it. It could be multiple ways to look at the value of a company. So if you look at these various options that you have, depending on your motive, so if you say, look, I've run this company and I don't have a lot of assets in retirement, my motives are I want to get the highest amount of cash. You know, you would be looking at selling it. Now, these are all ways to do that, and to be truthful with you, we don't do a ton of work over here, but there's lots of ways that you can set up the sale of a company to a third party. How many of you have ever been through selling the business to a third party? Interesting process, right? I've got one going on right now. 3 owners, family, and selling it to a private equity firm. It's a pretty interesting process. But that's a very different kettle of fish than this side of the equation, right? So really, if you look at this chart, we're saying the world that we're going to be in, talking about here, are what are called internal transfers or inside transfers, meaning that they're transfers within a controlled group of people that know each other, either their family members, their partners, okay? This side of the equation, if your motive says, hey man, I want the most amount of cash I can get, as you think about what to do, you should be thinking about this. Let's assume going public isn't an option for most people, okay? But if cash is the driving, you know, is a singular motive, then you know, you should be doing something over here. You should be looking to generate as much cash as you can in that transaction if that matters to you. But what we find is that many of the companies we work with have a duality of motives. It's not just financial stuff. There might be, what are the other motives that you could have here? Let's try to get a little more feedback from you guys.
Legacy.
Legacy of the business. often is the case. What else?
Lifestyle.
Lifestyle? What else?
I don't know how to say this because it's black or white, but it's, like freedom to operate the way you want as
Yep.
opposed to, following somebody else's music.
Yep. How about, looking after your kids or giving them an opportunity, right? That's always a big one. So what ends up happening is because motives, in most private companies, motives aren't that singular. We want to maximize the cash. You usually end up doing something over here. So if you look at, you've got a lot of things, and this is where we tend to work, ESOPs. Now we help people with ESOPs, but ESOPs are a very special technical animal. In fact, we had one of these discussions on ESOPs. We have a guy we work with. Anybody that'd like to get a copy of that, we filmed it. Phantom stock appreciation rights you could do for employees. You could do a charitable giving situation, right? We're doing a lot of that right now. And then co-ownership or family arrangements where, you've got, buy-sell agreements in place. So there's a lot of flexibility here. Now, why do you think the valuations are lower here versus here? Let's use the extreme. Selling to a private equity firm, selling to employees. Why are the valuations different?
They don't have the resources.
They don't have the money. The more scarce capital is, as a general rule, so let's think about employees. Forget ESOPs for a moment. But let's just think about, suppose you had a business where you didn't have any family involved and your employee group was going to take it over and run it. What do their resources usually look like? Their house, right? Do they tend to have a lot of liquid assets? Do they tend to have borrowing power? No. So anytime capital is scarce, it's more expensive and it's going to be deployed more carefully, right? An employee, look, the private equity firm is pretty careful too. Dave, you've sold your business and bought it back, right? They're careful about what they do, not always, but some more careful than others. But, they have access to capital. They raise money. They are answer to their people that invest with them. They got to provide a return. But they have capital to deploy. Employees don't have capital. So, if you want to go to the lowest part of the spectrum, transactions down here, or obviously gifts where you don't get any money or you gift a portion of it, there's not, the value of the whole thing is going to be less. So the idea here to get into your thinking is that when you're down here in inside transactions, generally speaking, the valuations are going to be less. And among these various options, ESOPs probably offers the highest valuation. If the company is structured well enough to handle an ESOP, you can actually fund those because there's some really terrific tax benefits to doing an ESOP that allows more money into the deal. So ESOPs can be actually not bad from a valuation standpoint. But they're still going to be less than if you sold it to an outside third party with cash. So the point of this, why is this here? It's not one size fits all. You got to think about why you're doing it, what are your motives, and if your motives are multiple issues, you got to think about which avenue you go down to try to do a transaction.